It's never been a better time to buy if you're a buyer. I hate to be the seller right now because the buyers got all the leverage.
Car dealers have more new and used car inventory on their lots than any other point so far in 2025, and the tide has finally turned. For the past few years, it's been a seller's market as automakers struggle to produce vehicles after the chip shortage and consumers kept buying. The seasonally adjusted sales rate tells us how many new cars are expected to be sold based on a current month's sales data. That number had been as high as 17.5 million vehicles this year. It's now been downgraded to 15.5 to 15.7 million vehicles sold. Now, let's start here on the demand side of things. It seems customers are finally fed up spending $50,000 plus to buy a new vehicle.
Well, when the average transaction price exceeds $50,000 and the average asking price of new vehicles out there exceeds $50,000, that just takes a big portion of buyers out of the market. The prices are so high that the buyers find themselves looking perhaps at pre-owned or just holding off altogether.
We're going to start here on new cars, and we'll talk about the used car market in just a second. But Dad, this is really self-inflicted by the manufacturers. Here's a 2026 Ram 1500 Laramie, and you can see it has a $74,600 MSRP, $25,000 higher than the average transaction price for a new car in the United States of America. Now look at that. The dealer invoice cost on this vehicle, $69,527. No wonder the automaker and the dealer wants to sell an expensive pickup truck like this. They make a boatload of money. But here's the deal. These new 2026s that are already starting to hit dealer lots, they are not selling. And that's because consumers have actually also said, we're not going to buy the expensive 2025s. You've got here, Dad, only 5 of this particular vehicle being sold within 500 miles in Kentucky. Yet dealers in this same area have over 2,000 for sale. There's a huge discrepancy here between supply and demand on the 2026s, which have gotten even more expensive than the 2025s. But the 26s aren't selling yet because the 25s were so expensive that customers aren't buying those. This is self-inflicted by the automakers.
And on top of it, the dealers are looking at the 2026s and they're thinking to themselves, we've got a year to sell these. If somebody wants a deal, if somebody wants to get a large discount, well, then they need to be buying one of our remaining 2025 pickup trucks, not a 2026. Yeah, the numbers are somewhat inflated because the 2026s just came out and large inventories were shipped to dealers. But the real key here is there's going to be and should be huge savings for customers on the 2025s.
Well, and there will be on the 2026s as well, because if the 2025s don't sell and the 2026s don't sell, they're ultimately always going to be sold new cars. It's just how low does the price go? And so on the new car side, you have less demand because consumers are saying no thank you to expensive vehicles. And on the supply side, Dad, we have the highest level of new car inventory in the United States that we've seen all year. There are almost 3 million new cars for sale nationwide. That number, for those of you that don't remember, that number during the chip shortage and the pandemic of 2020 and 2021 had been as low as 600, 700, 800,000 vehicles nationwide. We are now getting close to 3 million new cars in inventory. So these dealers have fewer customers and more cars. That's a recipe for disaster for sellers, but a great sign for shoppers. I mean, that is what makes a buyer's market for new cars right now.
Well, yeah, absolutely. When the amount of inventory far exceeds the demand for that product, the only way dealers and manufacturers know how to move that is to continue to lower the price until somebody's head goes, okay, I'll take it. So the key here is that pricing has gotten so high and inventory has started to really significantly grow again, because prior to the pandemic, there was typically about 3.5 million new vehicles available, and discounts were much larger than what we have been seeing. So if we're steadily approaching 3 million new vehicles in inventory and the number of people in the market is declining, then we will see prices decline as well in order to move those vehicles.
So we're returning to normalcy in the car market, and we also see that in the amount of profit that car dealers are making per vehicle sold. The chart that you're seeing on the screen shows new vehicle gross profit per vehicle sold skyrocketed to almost $4,600, just above $4,600 during the peak of the pandemic in 2022. it's back down to where it belongs to be at $1,800 per vehicle sold, much more in alignment with historical trends. And so we're seeing we're seeing the reality, excuse me, of what happens when supply and demand get out of whack. And again, fully self-induced by the automakers. They're the ones that have jacked up their prices and ultimately seen their inventory fall flat and not sell, leading to go back and watch one of our most viral videos, my dad explaining what happens to unsold new cars. There is no such thing as an unsold new car. The price just gets lowered. I will just make it very clear. You need to understand market conditions before you set realistic expectations for buying and negotiating a vehicle. Some brands, for example, Toyota and Lexus, have a very, very low days supply of inventory, meaning they're actually turning over their inventory fairly quickly. Other brands like Jeep or Mazda and Ford are struggling to sell their inventory, more negotiability there. But it gets even specific down to the geographic area and the model level. So lots of research to be done to understand how much negotiability a vehicle has.
And Zach, in regards to the average profit per new vehicle sold, yes, that number is returning to historical norms. The only problem is that the MSRPs, the asking prices of these vehicles, had gone up so much that even with the profit levels returning to historic norms, the prices are still out of reach for many, many people. So, with a declining number of customers and a continuing increase in inventories, those who are in the market should be able to get sizable discounts on most of the vehicles that they would consider.
Now let's talk about the used car market, because it is slowly but surely becoming a buyer's market over there as well. We are at 2.21 million used cars for sale nationwide. That is the highest level of inventory we've seen for used vehicles in the United States of America so far in 2025. On the used car side of things, Dad, it's a supply and demand equation as well. Prices for used cars have gotten unattainably high for many customers, leading to them getting themselves out of the market. And so ultimately, we're seeing more inventory start to sit, and that should eventually drive down some prices, or at a minimum, increase negotiability. Now, that being said, the used car market is still significantly more constricted than the new car market. So it's much more of a buyer's market on the new car side of things right now than it is on the used car side. However, the tide is turning there too.
Yeah, the used cars, not quite as strong a buyer's market. Maybe more like Switzerland. It's kind of neutral, but it is moving in the right direction. Once again, we are confronted with the fact that used car values skyrocketed so much during the pandemic, and they have come back to earth to some degree, but they are still probably 30% higher today than what they were prior to the pandemic. And that in itself is making it unaffordable for many, many people.
Now, that being said, we are seeing used car values start to decline fairly rapidly, not too dissimilar to what we saw in 2022 and 2023 when there were huge swings in volatility of used car prices. This data comes from Black Book, and it actually shows that relatively new used cars are declining in value more rapidly. 2 to 8-year-old used cars are declining more rapidly than older 8 to 16-year-old used cars. So that tells me a little bit that really we're seeing some of the affordability crisis show up in the used car market as well. The reason that the older used cars are not depreciating as much is because there's more demand at those more attainable price points. The older a used car is, the more attainable price point it is, versus those newer used cars. We're seeing more rapid depreciation because those prices are just absurd. People can't afford them, or they can't justify them when looking at a new vehicle option as well. The new vehicle one with the manufacturer warranty and the big dealer discount and the manufacturer incentives represents a better value in most cases. So I agree with you, Switzerland, but definitely leaning more towards a buyer's market than we had been so far in 2025. Let's end the video on this note, Dad.
Yes.
We are in the fourth quarter of 2025. If you're watching this around the time it got published on the internet, this is unequivocally the best time of year to be in the market to buy a new or used car, because all these manufacturers and all these dealers are trying to hit sales goals before the end of the year. Can you talk about that a little bit, Dad? You sold cars for 40 plus years. Talk about the frenzy and pandemania. Talk about the craziness that happens at the end of the year, Pops.
Well, it's really kind of simple. The manufacturer has set sales goals for not only themselves to hit, but for their dealers to hit. so that there's annual sales objectives that the dealers are trying to hit for their respective manufacturers. Every dealership sets sales goals for the year. Every salesperson sets sales goals for the year. So as we get further towards December, it becomes crystal clear as to how many sales the manufacturer needs, how many sales the dealership needs, how many sales the individual salesperson needs. So suddenly there's this incredible motivation to reach those goals that were set 11 months ago. And well, you have a limited amount of time, like about 31 days left to actually hit those goals. So the poop hits the fan, as they said in the movie Airplane, and everybody just starts going crazy trying to figure out how to make a deal towards the end of the year. Nobody wants to miss an objective. Nobody wants to miss their sales goals. Sales managers, I don't know, they lose all perspective altogether and take some of the stupidest deals that they would take all year long in order to help a salesperson hit a goal or the store hit a goal.
We offer services back at CarEdge.com to help you buy new and used vehicles. Essentially, you can take my dad and have him do all the work for you. Go check it out back at CarEdge.com and learn more about how we can help you take advantage of this moment in time where it actually does make sense to buy a vehicle. If you need one, if you just want one, I don't know, be smart about it. But if you need one, we can help you out. Pops, thanks as always for breaking down the data with me.
Thank you.